Hi, friends. Today we're looking at the book of Esther, part number 1, and the year is 2024. I'm your old pal Papa Dale, and this is the Jan Hus Institute of Biblical Studies, and it's the Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Literature degree program. Because there are always new viewers, I will briefly introduce myself. I'm a retired pastor, teacher, theologian, and professor with over 50 years of service to the Lord Jesus Christ. My name is Dale Warren, but professionally, I'm known in my writing, teaching, and lectures as D.A. Warren. And my friends, they all just call me Papa Dale, so you can too. Now, you can see the details of my personal testimony, family life, education, and ministry experience on other videos on this playlist. So for now, let's get right into today's topic, which is the Esther lecture, part number 1. Put on my glasses so I can see my notes. And off we go. The book of Esther stands out within the Hebrew Scriptures as a narrative that intricately weaves themes of divine providence, identity, and moral complexities faced by individuals living in a foreign land. Unlike many other biblical texts that overtly demonstrate God's intervention, Esther presents a unique tapestry where God's name is notably absent. This narrative centers on Esther, a Jewish woman who becomes queen of Persia, and her cousin Mordecai, whose unwavering faith and courage paved the way for the survival of their people, the Jewish people, amidst a plot to annihilate them. Evangelical scholars often highlight the significance of Esther's bravery and the concept of "for such a time as this," which underscores the belief that individuals are placed in specific circumstances for divine purposes. Now, from an evangelical perspective, the book of Esther serves as an essential exploration of God's sovereignty and the necessity of faithful action in the face of adversity. Through the lens of Esther's story, readers are called to reflect on the power of personal agency and the impact of faith in both public and private spheres. The narrative challenges believers to consider how they might respond to moral dilemmas and social injustices, and this encourages an active faith that transcends passivity. As Esther and Mordecai navigate their identities amidst cultural pressures, the text invites believers to engage with their own contexts, reaffirming the relevance of biblical teachings in the contemporary world. So, in your world, in your year, do you have struggles? Do you have challenges? Do you have opposition? Then the book of Esther is for you. Read it, learn it, live it, love it. So from a traditional evangelical viewpoint, the authorship of the book of Esther is often attributed to Mordecai, one of the main characters in the story of Esther. He is Esther's cousin and legal guardian. This belief stems primarily from the narrative's close connection to the events and the characters within the story, particularly given Mordecai's prominent role and his position as a key figure in the Jewish community during the Persian period. Several pieces of evidence support this traditional attribution. The first is the historical critical evidence for authorship of the book of Esther by Mordecai. The book of Esther provides detailed accounts of Persian customs and court life, suggesting that the author possessed a deep understanding of the historical and cultural setting. Mordecai, as a prominent figure in the Persian court, would likely have had the knowledge and perspective necessary to accurately recount these details. Evidence number 2, the first-person perspective. The text contains direct references to Mordecai's actions and motives, such as his refusal to bow to Haman and his subsequent role in the Jewish people's deliverance. This insider viewpoint lends credence to the idea that he was closely involved in the events described, he being the author. Point number 3, Judaic tradition. Early Jewish tradition also supports the idea of Mordecai's authorship. The Talmud mentions that Mordecai wrote the book, and it's a perspective that carries significant weight within the historical interpretation of the text. And then there is literary style, the style and structure of the book of Esther, characterized by its dramatic elements, tension, and eventual resolution, are consistent with the storytelling techniques prevalent in the oral traditions of that time, which Mordecai may have employed in recounting the events. While some scholars suggest other potential authors or emphasize the anonymous nature of the text, traditional evangelical interpretations favor Mordecai as the most likely author based on these lines of reading. Well, now let's look at what archaeology has to say about the historicity for the book of Esther. From an evangelical perspective, several archaeological findings and historical references are often cited to support the historicity of the book of Esther. While direct archaeological evidence, specifically confirming every detail of Esther's narrative, is limited, here are some relevant points and findings that help affirm the context and events that the book describes. Archaeological evidences, point 1. The Persian historical records. Archaeological discoveries, including inscriptions and artifacts from the Persian Empire, provide insights into the customs, governance, and society during the reign of Xerxes I, who is the Ahasuerus of the Book of Esther. These findings support the setting of the story and help confirm the portrayal of Persian court life, including the practices surrounding royalty and feasts. Archaeological evidence, point 2. The Behistun inscription. This inscription, created by Darius the Great, lists various provinces and gives information about the Persian Empire's administrative organization. This inscription provides a backdrop for understanding the political climate during the time of the events that Esther took place, and this validates the empire's vastness and influence mentioned in the book. Archaeological evidence, point number 3, would be the artifacts from Susa. Archaeological excavations at the ancient site of Susa, which is modern-day Shush in Iran, and it was the capital of the Persian Empire. This is where much of the story takes place, and these artifacts have unearthed structures, pottery, and seals that align with the descriptions of the place of the palace in Esther, supporting the setting described in the text. Point number 4, the significance of the Jewish diaspora. The existence of Jewish communities in the Persian Empire is evidenced by inscriptions and historical accounts, and corroborates the depiction of Esther and Mordecai's identities as Jews living in a foreign land. This reflects the historical reality of Jews during the exilic and post-exilic periods. Point number 5, this is under archaeology, the Book of Esther's themes of survival. The overarching themes of survival and providence, which ring true throughout Jewish history, resonate with external historical accounts of Jewish resilience during and after the Persian period, lending credence to Esther's narrative as a historical reflection of that time. While no archaeological find specifically verifies the miraculous elements of the Book of Esther, these pieces of evidence contribute to a broader understanding and context that supports the book's portrayal of Jewish life and the Persian Empire in which it is set, and affirming its historicity from an evangelical standpoint. So this is part of the evidence why we believe that this is an actual historical account and not merely legendary. Another part of evidence is the non-archaeological. Again, from an evangelical perspective, several non-archaeological evidences support the historicity of the events in the book of Esther. Here are some of those. Number one is the historical context. The events in Esther take place during the reign of Xerxes I, called Ahasuerus in Esther, and the book reflects a detailed understanding of Persian political and social structures, which aligns with historical records from the period. And this context helps validate the plausibility of the story. Point number two, linguistic and literary features. The Hebrew language and literary style of the book of Esther show a mastery of narrative techniques common in ancient literature. The book includes specific cultural references and nuances that suggest it was written for an audience familiar with Jewish life and Persian customs during the relevant time frame. Point number three, Jewish tradition. The book of Esther is traditionally read during the Jewish feast of Purim, which commemorates the events described in the book. The long-suffering observance of Purim among Jewish communities underscores the cultural memory of these events and serves as a testament to their significance in Jewish history. This is kind of like Hanukkah and the cultural memory of Hanukkah on the part of the Jewish people, which is the commemoration of the rebellion, intertestamental rebellion, the 400 years that are called the silent years, which they aren't really silent. But during that period of time, there was a rebellion against Rome, and Hanukkah is a celebration that commemorates that. So much in the same way, Purim is a celebration that continued on in Jewish culture to celebrate the events in the book of Esther. Now, point number four, Mordecai and Esther's Jewish identity. The clear emphasis on the Jewish identity of the protagonists, Esther and Mordecai, suggests a historical backdrop where the Jewish community sought to affirm their identity and survival within the Persian Empire. This aligns with the experiences of the Jewish diaspora during this period. Point number five, themes of providence and deliverance. The overarching themes of God's providence and deliverance of his people resonate with broader biblical narratives and traditions. Evangelicals often interpret these narratives not just as literary constructs, but as reflections of God's ongoing relationship with his people throughout history. Point number six is the non-canonical references. Some ancient Jewish writings and later Christian interpretations acknowledge the book of Esther's events and characters, suggesting a recognition of their historical significance. Although not considered canonical, these references can provide additional context and support the story's historical validity. Just because something is non-canonical doesn't mean that it is untrue. Legendary things are non-canonical. Legendary stories about, say, George Washington, the first president of the United States back in the 1700s, like him chopping down a cherry tree or throwing a silver dollar all the way across the mile-wide Potomac River. Those are legendary, but there are lots of other writings about him that are not legendary. They are not canonical, but they are true. So we have Non-archaeological evidences number 7, the cultural practices. The practices described in Esther, such as fasting, feasting, and the role of courtiers, reflect customs that were consistent with historical accounts of Persian culture. This cultural alignment supports the legitimacy of the narrative in its historical context. Now, while these non-archaeological evidences do not serve as direct proof of the specific events described in the Book of Esther, they help to establish an understanding of its historical and cultural context, leading to credibility of the story as a significant account within the Jewish faith history. Well, what was the historical setting like back in that day? The Babylonian king who took the Hebrews captive was Nebuchadnezzar II. He reigned from 605 to 562 BC, and he is known for his conquests, including the siege of Jerusalem. Nebuchadnezzar II captured Jerusalem in 586 BC, leading to the destruction of the First Temple and the Babylonian exile of the Jewish people. This dominance of the Babylonians lasted only about 50 years. The fall of Babylon marked a significant moment in Jewish history, contributing to the dispersion of the Jewish people and the development of Jewish identity during and after the exile. Nebuchadnezzar was defeated by Cyrus the Great, the first major Achaemenid king. Now, the Achaemenid dynasty became the ruling power. The first notable ruler of the Achaemenid dynasty was Cyrus the Great, and he was the one who founded the empire in the mid-6th century BC. The roots of the empire were before him, but he founded the empire itself. Now, his dynasty played a significant role in building one of the largest empires in ancient history, known for its cultural and administrative achievements. The period of its rulership over Mesopotamia occurred from 539 BC, when Cyrus the Great conquered the Neo-Babylonian Empire, until the fall of the Achaemenid Empire in 330 BC, so roughly 200 years. The empire expanded significantly and, during its height, encompassed a vast territory which included Mesopotamia, Persia, parts of Asia Minor, the Levant, which is the Holy Lands, and Egypt. This expansion was marked by military conquests and strategic diplomacy. Known for his respectful treatment of conquered peoples, Cyrus allowed the Babylonians, the Jews, and others to maintain their cultural and religious practices. He is often celebrated for issuing the Cyrus Cylinder, which is considered one of the first declarations of human rights. Now, if you know anything about Greek history, and you know anything about the saga of the 300 Spartans, then it was the Achaemenid dynasty and Xerxes who Leonidas led the Greeks against. So you can see that what we're talking about here in the build-up to the Book of Esther is truly historical. The Achaemenids implemented a bureaucratic system that divided the empire into provinces called satrapies, each overseen by a governor, a satrap, and this administration facilitated effective governance and taxation, as well as communication across vast distances. The Achaemenid rulers promoted cultural and religious tolerance, allowing various cultures within the empire, including Mesopotamian, Persian, and others, to flourish as long as they remained loyal and paid their taxes. The Achaemenid Empire invested in infrastructure, including the Royal Road, which improved trade and communication across the empire. They also undertook significant construction projects, including impressive architecture and irrigation systems in Mesopotamia. The Achaemenid Empire began to decline due to internal strife, overexpansion, and external pressures, and it ultimately fell to Alexander the Great in 330 BC, marking the end of the Achaemenid rule and the beginning of Hellenistic influences. And so what we're talking about here is the historical setting, the historical backdrop for the book of Esther. And to embellish that a little bit more, the Achaemenid kings who have been mentioned in the Bible by name include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cyrus the Great, see him in Isaiah 44:28 and 45:1. Cambyses II, we see him in Ezra 4:6. Darius the Great, we see him in Haggai 1:1, Zechariah 1:1, Ezra 4:24 and 5:5. Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus, we see his name in Esther 1:1, and Artaxerxes, we see him in Ezra 7:1 and Nehemiah 2:1. Now these kings play significant roles in the historical context of the Jews, their return from exile, as well as their subsequent challenges during the Achaemenid period, as detailed in the biblical accounts. Well, that's the historical context. Now let's have a look at the cultural context. The cultural context for the people in the book of Esther, is situated during the Persian period, specifically the 5th century BCE, which that would be the 400s, and here that would be the 600s. And here are some key aspects. On the BC side of Jesus, the centuries go downward from, in this case, it would be from the 5th century or the 600s down to the birth of Jesus. Now, having gotten off on that rabbit trail, let's continue to look at the context for the people in the book of Ezra. The first cultural context that we'll look at is exile and diaspora. The Jewish people were in exile after the Babylonian conquest, and many had settled in Persia. Esther and Mordecai, her cousin and guardian, were among the Jews living in Susa, the capital of the Persian Empire in what is now southwest Iran. This diaspora had a significant impact on Jewish identity and practices. And so now we have cultural context. Point number 2, cultural assimilation. Many Jews during this period faced the challenge of maintaining their cultural and religious identity while living in a predominantly Persian society. This often includes navigating and resisting the pressures of assimilation into Persian customs, language, and religion. If you've ever lived in a country that was a blended country with lots of nationalities and ethnicities living in that country, you would understand what we're talking about here, which is people tend to lose their own personal national identity, and they tend to absorb the identity of the collective of people around them. Pardon me. Point number 3 is political power. The narrative of Esther takes place within the context of Persian court life, highlighting the influence of politics and power dynamics. The story addresses themes of loyalty, identity, and survival in a foreign land. Esther, as a Jewish woman who becomes queen, exemplifies a unique position of influence. Pardon me. Keep in mind, this is a story about royalty in the land of Babylon and Persia, and it is not necessarily all that reflective of the common life of the people. Bandit, please be quiet. Now, in this cultural context, there is also, point number 4, religious tension. The Jews had a distinct religious identity based on their covenant with Yahweh. The book of Esther does not explicitly mention God, reflecting the reality of living in a secular environment. Nevertheless, the Jewish characters display faith and reliance on Yahweh's providence, which is a key theme in the story. And so we have cultural context, point 5, festivals and remembrance. The book of Esther culminates in the establishment of Purim, a festival celebrating the Jews' deliverance from a plot to destroy them. This emphasizes the importance of remembrance and community within the Jewish faith, reflecting the broader importance of festivals in Jewish culture. Overall, the cultural context of the book of Esther underscores themes of faith, identity, and deliverance amidst challenges and external pressures faced by the Jewish community in a foreign empire. So why was Esther even written? What was the purpose? The book of Esther serves several purposes. The first is the narrative of deliverance. Esther tells a story of how the Jewish people were saved from a plot to exterminate them during the Persian Empire. The narrative centers on Esther, a Jewish woman who becomes queen, and her cousin Mordecai, and both play crucial roles in thwarting the schemes of Haman, who is a powerful advisor to the king. Point number 2 is the establishment of Purim. Esther formally establishes the festival of Purim, detailing the origins of the celebration and the customs associated with it. By recounting the events and declaring the days of Purim as occasions for feasting and joy, it serves to memorialize the deliverance of the Jewish people. Purpose point number 3, identity and community. The book of Esther emphasizes Jewish identity and resilience in the face of adversity. It reinforces the idea of community, solidarity, and the importance of standing together against threats, promoting the notion of divine providence in Jewish history. Purpose point number 4, literary and theological themes. The narrative of Esther explores themes of courage, identity, and the hidden nature of God in the events of history, as God is not mentioned explicitly in the text. This aspect encourages readers to find and recognize the divine presence and His guidance in their own lives, even when it's not obvious. And purpose number 5, cultural assimilation and resistance. The book of Esther reflects the complexities of living as a minority in a foreign land, and the balance between assimilation and maintaining one's identity and traditions. And so overall, the book of Esther combines historical narrative with theological and cultural lessons, making it a significant work in Jewish literature and identity. Now, any piece of literature has themes that it wants to express, and Esther is no different. The book of Esther presents several key themes that are integral to its message and narrative. Some of the most significant themes include 1. The divine providence. Despite the absence of God's direct mention, the theme of divine providence runs throughout the story. The events unfold in a way that suggests God is guiding the characters and orchestrating circumstances for the eventual deliverance of the Jewish people. Theme point number 2, courage and agency. Esther's bravery in approaching King Xerxes, Ahasuerus, to plead for her people reflects the theme of personal courage and the taking of action in times of crisis. It emphasizes the importance of individuals stepping up to make a difference, even under difficult circumstances. Theme number 3 is identity and heritage. The theme of Jewish identity is prominent as Esther navigates her dual identity both as a Jew and a queen in a foreign land. The narrative highlights the significance of cultural and religious identity as well as the challenges faced by minorities in a dominant culture. Theme point number 4, the role of women. Esther serves as a strong female protagonist, showcasing the influence of women and agency of women within a patriarchal society. Her story underscores the potential impact women can have in leadership roles and in critical situations. Theme point 5, opposition and deliverance. The book addresses the theme of opposition, particularly through Haman's plot against the Jews. It contrasts the danger posed by such opposition with the eventual deliverance and victory of Esther and her people, highlighting the idea of redemption. Point number 6, feasting and celebration. The recurring motif of feasting symbolizes joy and communal celebration. The establishment of the festival of Purim at the end of the story serves as a reminder of deliverance and the importance of community in overcoming adversity. And point number 7, the theme of justice and retribution. The theme of justice is woven throughout this narrative, particularly with Haman's downfall and the justice served to him for his plots against the Jews. Nobody ever prospers ultimately by plotting against the Jews. The story emphasizes that evil intentions will ultimately be met with consequences. Yeah, and you don't like those consequences coming from Yahweh. These themes together create a rich narrative that addresses the timeless issues of identity, faith, courage, and the complexities of human behavior in the face of adversity. Esther, the book, does not directly reference the person of Yahweh. Scholars suggest that this is so for several reasons. The first is literary style. The narrative style of Esther is more secular and courtly compared to other biblical texts. Now remember, if Mordecai is the author, he is a member of this high court of Xerxes. The focus is on characters and plot development within the Persian royal context, which gives it a distinct narrative approach that does not emphasize divine intervention quite as prominently. So, point number 2, the topic here is, why is the person of God not mentioned in the book Esther? And point number 2 under that is the theological intent. The omission of God's name may reflect a theological point that highlights the hiddenness of God in the lives of the Jewish people during the Persian exile. Instead of relying on overt divine action, the story illustrates how God's providence can work through human agency and natural events, whether they are aware of him or not. And this prompts readers to seek to discern the divine in their own experiences today. And so we have point number 3 under the topic of why the person of God is not mentioned in the book of Esther. The story takes place in a foreign empire, and a direct mention of God might have been less appropriate in a narrative set and written about within a Persian royal court. The absence of explicit theological language could reflect a form of cultural adaptation while still preserving Jewish identity. Point number 4, focus on human action. The emphasis in Esther on Esther and Mordecai and their decisive actions to save their people may serve to highlight human courage and resourcefulness in times of crisis. The absence of God's direct mention places greater importance on his hidden empowerment and agency. Are there times in your life where you've just felt like you had no energy or no power, and yet the Spirit of God came in and did energize you and give you power? I have. So that's what some scholars are appealing to happened here with the book of Esther. Starting to lose our light just a little bit. See if I can get a little more light in here. There's a little more. Okay, point number 5, covenant themes. Some scholars argue that while God is not explicitly mentioned, the themes of covenant and divine protection are implied throughout the narrative, as the deliverance of the Jews is portrayed as consistent with God's safeguarding of his people throughout history. Another point that's not in the notes is, why would the people be celebrating and worshiping and praising God for their deliverance in the book of Esther if God was not a part of those events, if it was not his empowerment that motivated them? So overall, the lack of direct reference to God invites readers to engage with the text on different levels, and invites them to consider ways in which divine influence may be present, even if not overly stated, even if you may not recognize it. So who are the main characters in the book of Esther? Well, the book of Esther features several key characters. Each of them play an important role in the narrative, and here are the main ones. So we have Esther herself. Esther, her Hebrew name is Hadassah. She is a Jewish woman who becomes the queen of Persia. She's an orphan, raised by her cousin Mordecai. Esther is known for her beauty and courage as she risks her life to approach King Xerxes to save her people from a genocidal plot. Key character number 2 would be Mordecai. Mordecai is Esther's cousin and her legal guardian. He is a Jewish official in the Persian court who uncovers a plot to assassinate the king. Mordecai's refusal to bow down to Haman, who is another royal advisor, leads to Haman's vengeance against the Jewish people. And he plays a crucial role in encouraging Esther to speak out against Haman's decree. Mordecai plays this crucial role. Then we have main character point number 3, King Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus. Xerxes, the ruler of the Persian Empire during the events of the story, is depicted as powerful, but easily swayed. He initially banishes his first queen Vashti for disobedience, and later marries Esther. His decisions significantly impact the course of events regarding the Jewish people in his empire. Key character number 4 is Haman. Haman is the antagonist of the story, an arrogant and ambitious prime minister who becomes enraged at Mordecai's refusal to bow to him. In his anger, he plots the annihilation of all Jews in the empire. What an evil guy. His downfall becomes a turning point in the narrative, as his plans are thwarted by a woman, by Queen Esther. And key character number 5 is Vashti. Vashti is the queen of Xerxes at the beginning of the story, and she stands up to the king when he demands that she appear before him and his guests, and she refuses. This leads to her removal from her queenly position. Her defiance sets the stage for Esther's rise to power. Now, these characters are the people who drive the plot of the book of Esther, which emphasizes themes of courage, identity, and divine providence. And so that is part 1 of the book of Esther. I'm your old pal Papa Dale, and this is the year 2024. This lecture has been Esther, Part 1 of 3 for the Jan Hus Institute in Biblical Studies. Now, great insights leading to deeper relationship with Jesus await you, so keep going. Keep watching videos and keep reading the notes from the videos. Actually, please remember to read those printed notes and look up the scripture citations too if you're studying for the degree, the Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Literature. You can find those notes in the video transcript or at the link below. And so, this is your old pal Papa Dale saying, until next time, I'm going to be praying for you that you will be well and that you'll be blessed.